We got the world's largest outdoor cocktail party headed to Jacksonville this weekend, but what will it take to see Florida get the massive upset win over number one Georgia? If you're brand new here, welcome on into the channel. My name is Thompson. I'm a radio show host based in Houston, Texas, and I talk college football every single day. I talk NFL, MLB, NHL, NBA, but I love talking college football. And if you're a fan of this type of content, this is the channel made for you. So hit the subscribe button down below. Leave a comment on how you think Florida can survive or upset Georgia in Jacksonville, and tell your friends, your family, your enemies, really everybody about this channel. Because if we get to 1,000 subscribers by November 15th, I will shave my head live on air. Shaving to go completely Lex Luthor style. We have 3 live shows, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. You're not going to want to miss out. So subscribe to the channel, give a thumbs up on the video, and let's talk college football. So the world's largest outdoor cocktail party is one of the best rivalries in all of college football. And it really is a pinnacle in the SEC, and I'm glad that we're keeping it around because we should. It's just a great game. But the ambiance around this game and the hoopla this year kind of has been a little stale if you think about it. And I'm not sure why. I'm not going to go into details about why this game needs to be at the forefront of every conversation because it's up to you, the viewers. If you want this game to be big, you'll tune in and then we'll get the accolades for it afterwards. But this game has really had massive implications on who decides and represents the SEC East in Atlanta for the last several seasons. Florida in 2020 getting the win. It wasn't in Jacksonville, but you get that point. They get the win. They get the SEC title. Georgia's won 5 of the last 8 matchups between these two. So it is a big game. It's a massive game for what determines the representative in the East. And as of now, Georgia is still the clear-cut favorite to win the SEC. They probably are going to go to the college football playoff, but you can't really count out Florida. And have you kind of noticed that nobody at the national perspective is talking about Florida? And probably it's because of other games have been more poignant, but it's not because Florida hasn't done its job. Let's make sure that we mention that. Year 1 of Billy Napier was about establishing a culture and establishing what you believe are your morals and your ethics and the way that players need to follow. Year 2 has been about building off that mediocre success and turning this program into something of prominence going into year 3, which is where everything is supposed to really kick off. And outside of really one bad showcase, but it wasn't even that terrible. It's just not as good as you wanted it to be against Utah. And Ray Davis running rampant against you when you played Kentucky. This has been an actual very sophisticated and sound Florida team. They really have. They're 5-2. They're a game away from being bowl eligible in year 2 of the Billy Napier era. They're a game away from beating the spread of what Vegas had them at 5.5 to begin the year. And they're playing sound football offensively, primarily. Graham Mertz was not viewed by many, and yours truly even could say this, wasn't viewed by many as a guy that thought was going to change the persona of Florida. And a lot of other quarterbacks that were in the transfer portal, you kind of sat there and wondered, why is Billy Napier hitching his wagon to this guy? Well, the last 2 games are pretty evident as of why. Last week or 2 weeks ago before the bye, when they played South Carolina, he went off. He threw for over 400 yards, 3 touchdowns. He completed over 60% of his throws, and he finished with a passer rating of 157. In his last 2 games, Graham Mertz is averaging a completion percentage of around 74%. He has 6 touchdowns against 0 interceptions, a passer rating of 187, and he's thrown for over 250 yards in both of those games, including over 400 against South Carolina in a comeback win. So he is hitting his stride at the right time. You still have one of the better 1-2 combinations on the ground in Montrell Johnson and in Trevor Etienne. You're seeing Trey Wilson really become a poignant part of this offense because of the pre-snap motion and how he's utilized. And Ricky Pearsall is vastly underappreciated in terms of SEC receivers. Like, we know the big names, Malik Neighbors and Luther Burden, and you could even probably throw Brock Bowers in there, even though he's not a receiver, but he literally does it all. He's a human weapon that was created in a factory, and I don't know where that factory is, but please continue to build more of those for the future of college football. But Pearsall ranks number 5 in receiving yards in the SEC. And he has been a really good, strong catalyst and domination factor to this Florida offense. And defensively, Florida is an elite in terms of pass coverage, pass defense. They don't create a lot of turnovers, and certainly they've had their mishaps throughout the season. But this is a defense that ranks top 20. They're allowing fewer than 330 yards per game, and they're playing their best version of football as of late. And even Kirby Smart, who said into this week's pregame that this was the best version of Florida that we've seen. And so Florida has all this confidence that is riding high, and they're building off of momentum, and they seem to be clicking on all three phases of the game at the right moment. And they just got a massive win on the road, I might add, which is very important. And I think that people all the time are going to say, well, road wins don't really matter. Road wins absolutely matter in the SEC. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, if you've never been, Williams-Brice Stadium in Columbia, South Carolina is one of the more hostile, underappreciated college football atmospheres. It's an incredible place to play a game. And if you do not play your best version of football, or unless South Carolina slips up like they did, you're walking out of there with an L. And that's what happened, is that South Carolina slipped up and they allowed Florida to work their way back in because of the passing attack. And look at where they sit now. Now this is a Florida team that has confidence and has momentum that should carry over into a neutral site location. And by the way, this is going to be a really good matchup between quarterbacks. This really is. A lot of people are not giving the flowers that are due to Carson Beck at Georgia because he's played phenomenal as of late. But for Florida, this is a game that you don't have to win, per se, to gain respect in the national spotlight. What this does is if you play up to your standards and you're able to really hinder the success of Georgia, whether that be on the ground and make them one-dimensional through the air without Brock Bowers out there, or really only allow them to win by the ground game by taking away Ra Thomas and Ladd McConkey, and you can probably throw in Dominic Lovett in the slot for that matter. If you make them one-dimensional, you do have a shot. And I know that people are going to say, how can you say Florida has a shot against Georgia when you look at what this team has been at times? Because momentum has a massive role. And neutral site games always seem to sometimes be a coin flip when teams are playing at their best. And on top of that, we've yet to see Georgia play a football game without Brock Bowers. And so this isn't a cheat code, but when you get the kind of pathway to victory, you take advantage of that as much as possible. And I think Florida is going to do that this week. Now, I'm not picking an upset by any means whatsoever. I think Georgia wins this game pretty soundly by the second half. I think that by the fourth quarter, you see them pull away from what is maybe a 3-point game, and they win by 10. But I do think that Florida can cause fits and rifts to where Georgia actually feels the pressure. And it's one thing to feel pressure when you're playing against Auburn. Auburn is a very sound team defensively when they play at home, and they did so against Georgia in week 4. But what's interesting is that if you go back and you watch that Georgia-Auburn game, the reason Georgia won was because of who they had at tight end. X factor, Brock Bowers. Just literally 19, 19, 19, gain of 10, gain of 13, gain of 15, touchdown. That's how they won that football game. And so if you catch Georgia slipping early, like we've seen before, where they've been anemic offensively and the play calling has been a little far-fetched and they're unable to establish a really good balance of run-to-pass option, you have a shot. It's a slim one, but you still have a shot. And as long as you play up to your standard and you take away the passing attack, or you do whatever you can to eliminate the run game, which is a little easier said than done, as evident by Ray Davis running rampant, you do have a great chance of making this thing interesting. And what does a win do for you? Well, I'm glad that you asked. Number one, it justifies the hiring of Billy Napier and the trust factor that year one was all about just building a foundation, and year two was about capitalizing on said foundation. Number two, it's a great aspect for recruiting. You get a win over a rival, especially in a new era of SEC football that will now feature Texas and Oklahoma. You're probably getting some kids that are leaning toward one side or another turn toward you. And number three, you are bowl eligible, which is a huge step forward for Billy Napier and the staff. You have now the opportunity to sit in the driver's seat of maybe being a dark horse of representing the East. And You control your own destiny. There's still games ahead. There still are very good, poignant games ahead for Florida to win. Florida State, a Missouri team that does look a completely 180 version of what they were last year, and Georgia. You get all three of those wins. I'm not saying you're going to a prominent bowl game, but I'm definitely saying that people are buying stock in what Billy Napier is selling and well, they should in Gainesville. If you play sound defense, and if this offense can trust what you've seen in Graham Mertz, and that really does mean looking at receivers outside of Ricky Pearsall. That does mean getting a guy like Trey Wilson more involved. That does mean having that trust factor with Khalili Jackson or Arliss Boardingham at tight end. Those are things that you want to build off of. But if you can do that and set the tone early, Georgia is going to have to play like their hair is on fire to get the win. And really even just get the win, not even cover the spread. And I think Georgia can do that. I also think Florida can make this happen to where it is. The two things that I'm looking for in this game. Number one, how can you attack Georgia early to build a lead and force them to have to go up tempo in the second half? Because that's what Auburn was able to do. That's what South Carolina was able to do. But their defenses weren't sound enough to be able to hold the rope in the final 15 minutes. And that's why both of those teams lost at the end of the day. Can Georgia fall behind against Florida? And can Florida's defense do enough in the first half to where it's a 17-point swing in favor of the Gators to where that's the only way that Florida's coming back to win this one? I mean, if Georgia's coming back to win this one. And can you play a sound third quarter? Because that's where an area that you've seen Georgia really start to pick up the pace. That third quarter coming out of halftime, making those necessary adjustments, is that where they are able to actually come together? And the second thing, and the most important thing in my opinion, how can you win on third down? Because that's really what's going to decide this game. Georgia right now ranks number 1 in the country on third down defense. Florida is 109th, if I'm not mistaken, in third down offensive conversions. So there's reasons for optimism and reasons for skepticism. If you can move the football methodically, and not every single time walk away with a touchdown, but just get points, I think Florida has a shot. I'm not picking Florida, but I will say I saw the line at 14.5 and my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe that we're really going to give Georgia this much credit when what we've seen of the passing attack outside of Brock Bowers be kind of invisible at times. But still, that's betting. That's Vegas for you. I would say go ahead and take Florida in this game, at least with the points. And I think you're going to make it a battle. But even if you don't win this football game, just showing that you're confident and trending upward in the right direction is a huge positive for Billy Napier. I think the Gators can do that. And honestly, by the time that we're in the fourth quarter, I think we will be looking at the Gators in a much more prominent light, one that we probably should have been for quite some time at this point. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching that video. Don't hit the X button yet. Make sure you hit subscribe to keep up with all of our daily content found on Just Saying It and anything else that we post on this channel. Bye.